Hey everybody, it is Wednesday, October 23rd. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, I just taped a conversation with a pollster.
Of course you did.
I'm sort of obsessed.
Because what else would you be doing, Moshe, with about 2 weeks until Election Day?
I'm trying to get a sense of what's going to happen. And what was interesting, and we're going to be putting this out on the premium podcast today. It'll be on the interview podcast several days later. Remember, if you're a premium member, you get everything first and some exclusive stuff. One takeaway I got from this longtime pollster at the Pew Research Center is that effectively he's like, listen, success for polls is being right within 2 to 3%. And so as far as they're concerned, regardless of who wins, as long as it's close, and if it's a close Trump win or a close Harris win, effectively the polls were right because they're within the margin of error. They're predicting a tie. If for some reason it's a blowout either way, then he's like, yeah, then we screwed up again and we'll have to fix it for 2028. So that's your big takeaway. Like weather forecasters, they call themselves election forecasters. You're not going to be 100% right on the weather, but you're going to give people a percentage chance, right? There's a chance of rain or a chance of snow or et cetera. And that's the way that the pollsters view themselves. So cut them some slack.
What's that meme? It's like weather forecasting, the only profession where you can be wrong most of the time and still not lose your job.
As somebody who grew up aspiring to be a meteorologist, Jill, very young Moshe wanted to be a weatherman. That's what I wanted to be. I wrote letters to the local weathermen. Cut them some slack too. They're trying their best. The models, the weather doesn't always cooperate. And in this case, the pollsters, they're trying to get a sense of how 300 million Americans feel about things. So, cut them a little slack on it. I'm on Team Pollster here.
You could also argue that it's our fault in the media, that we are so obsessed with polls,
yes,
that maybe we shouldn't be, right? That we should actually not be covering the horse race. We should be covering more of the actual issues.
Yeah, and even the way we communicate them, they're like, oh, Trump is up today, 47 to 46. That's a tie. It's within the margin of error. Kamala Harris is surging from 2 points up to 3 points. No, she's not. It's all within the margin of error. So tisk tisk, fellow media, members of the media, you could do a better job of helping the public understand these things.
Okay, Moshe, so let's get to the news and do exactly what we were just complaining about.
But we do it with context.
Okay. With Election Day 2 weeks away, 17 million voters have already cast a ballot. What kind of trends we are seeing so far? Oh my God, Moshe, we are so part of the problem.
And no, I'm not the problem. It's not me, Jill, because we will talk to you about the margin of error. We always do that here.
Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is tapping into some star power ahead of Election Day. We're talking Bruce Springsteen and Eminem.
But does it matter? We'll ask that question.
And Donald Trump set to sit down with Joe Rogan as he continues to make a play for male voters.
And Kamala Harris sitting down with Brene Brown in this Mars-Venus election that we have going on.
The ex-CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch has been arrested on sex trafficking charges, what we know about the troubling allegations against him. And a judge rules that Rudy Giuliani needs to turn over some luxury items to cover the judgment in the Georgia poll worker case.
Not just luxury items, his apartment. But will he have to turn over his World Series rings as part of the judgment? We'll ask that question.
In business news, Walmart is taking on Amazon with nationwide same-day prescription delivery. And when it comes to travel, American Airlines is cracking down on what's known as gate lice. So this is not what you think it is, okay? These are early boarders.
Yeah, your first clue is one gate lice that we know is apparently Jill and her family. She'll explain.
That makes it sound so terrible. But in my...
I didn't say you have lice, Jill. I just said that
I'm
you guys
itchy.
admittedly...
I'm itchy.
There you go.
Meanwhile, an airport in New Zealand is setting a time limit on how long you can say goodbye to your loved ones.
And why it's 99% longer than they let you say goodbye at JFK or O'Hare.
Plus, Moshe has on this day in history.
Et tu, Brute? That's your clue.
And then there were 2 weeks, that is, actually less than 2 weeks until Election Day. And Moshe, perhaps for the first time in U.S. history, Election Day might be a misnomer because it's really been election month. More than 17 million Americans have already cast their ballots. So we talked yesterday about how the COVID pandemic has changed so many aspects of our lives. Yesterday, it was how Gen Zers don't really understand this idea of happy hour, but it also extends to the way we vote. Back in 2020, millions of people voted by mail to avoid having to go to a crowded polling place. But I guess a lot of people realized, hey, it's kind of nice. They like doing it. And since then, there have been new laws that expanded early voting options and mail-in options as well. So it looks like voting even weeks before election day is now a permanent feature of our election process. One example, the swing state of Michigan passed a law back in 2022. It requires 9 days of early voting, and it also lets voters get a mail ballot every election without having to apply for one. Also, in the swing state of Georgia, voters there have set a daily record for in-person early voting nearly every day since the polls opened last Tuesday. North Carolina has also been setting records for early voting, despite still recovering from Hurricane Helene. Same with Louisiana, which is a deep red state. And most that is partly what is different this year. Back in 2020, most of the early voters and mail-in voters were Democrats. In fact, at the time, if you remember, Donald Trump was expressing a lot of skepticism about early voting and voting by mail. This time around, he's leaning in. There are signs at his campaign events encouraging people to get out and vote early. According to some preliminary numbers from the New York Times, Democrats are still dominating mail voting, but Republicans are catching up. In Pennsylvania, more than 580,000 Democrats have already returned their mail ballots compared to just 254,000 Republicans. But percentage-wise, that's actually up for Republicans. In Nevada, it's the same situation. More Democrats have turned in mail ballots so far, but a bigger percentage of Republicans have than 4 years ago. Also in Nevada, some new numbers from the Secretary of State. Republicans have taken the lead there by 8,000 votes. But there are still 2 weeks to go here, so it's important not to read too much into all of this. It's way too early to know if this means that there's going to be more Republican turnout overall, or maybe more Democrats will be showing up on election day. And just because someone's a registered Republican does not mean that they're necessarily voting one way or the other.
Yeah, you mentioned one of the key differences this go around. It wasn't just skepticism last time from Trump. He said that early voting is corrupt. Don't do it. Republicans realizing later that early voting was probably one of the reasons that Joe Biden was able to win last go around. So despite the rhetoric last time, he has embraced it. Republicans are embracing it here. And you're seeing that it's helping them. It's benefiting them in some of these states, like Nevada, as you mentioned, where you want to bank these votes because ultimately we know how life is on election day. It's one of the reasons why there's a full out effort here, because on election day, you could wake up, your car could break down. You could have an issue in your family. Someone could be sick, an issue at work, and then you don't end up voting. And that's why early voting here, especially since we're one of the only countries that doesn't have a voting holiday. In many countries, election day is a holiday, so you don't have to go to work. That's the only thing to do. And so here, at least early voting in a number of states enables people to get out there, cast their ballot. And in a number of these states, they've been running mail operations for a long time, places like Oregon, Washington State, etc. So some fascinating trend lines to watch. At the same time, early voters are what we call high propensity voters, meaning they probably voted in the past. They're really into voting. And so there's only so much you can read into it. It's the people who aren't early voting that are like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to vote. Those are the people the campaigns are trying to reach right now. In North Carolina, 85% of those who have voted early this year also voted in 2020. And keep in mind, when we talk about these statistics, Jill, we don't know the results. We just counted the overall ballots. And that's something to note here is they don't open the ballots and start to count Democrat, Republican, vote for Trump, vote for Harris until the voting has stopped. They might put them into the machine, but there's a whole bunch of security measures in place. They just know we've received this many ballots. And they're from this many registered Republicans or this many registered independents. What we also know about early voters, women are voting early at higher rates than men. And we should note that in most presidential elections, women have voted at a slightly higher rate than men. And in this year, as we see a huge gender gap, that's where Democrats are trying to really play hard to the women here, take advantage of the advantage right now that Harris has among women. And at the same time, you're seeing men moving towards Trump, but will they end up showing up is one of the big questions, especially among men under 40. The hardest folks across the spectrum to get to the polls. Some evidence that we're looking at right now, and both sides will point to things they're happy about and they're concerned about, but we did get a couple of headlines of concern from the Harris campaign, things that are making the Trump campaign happy here. Number one, a report from NBC yesterday that there's a possible crack in the blue wall. The blue wall being Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. That's the wall, so to speak, that if Democrats can win that, they can win the election. It helped Biden win the election. The crack there, the losses there, led to Hillary Clinton's loss and Trump's victory in 2016. There's a concern among the Harris campaign that Michigan and Wisconsin are particularly vulnerable, particularly Michigan here. Lackluster turnout so far in early voting among black voters. The Arab American vote starting to move towards Trump. The Jewish American vote in Michigan also moving closer to Trump. Again, not seeing a majority there, but again, they're not voting for Democrats like they have historically. And so that's a matter of concern for the Harris campaign. So they got to get to 270 electoral votes. Jill, do you ever play on the website 270towin.com?
I don't, but I'm guessing you do.
Oh, do
like
I?
every day. This is how you fall asleep at night.
Yes. Well, I don't know if it helps me fall asleep. It keeps me awake. I was like, what about this scenario? So 270 to win, the number 270, TO win, you can actually color in the maps and see if Harris wins these states or Trump wins these states, this is their method to victory. And the issue with the blue wall is if she doesn't win or Trump wins Michigan or Wisconsin, that makes things much more likely for him to win. It makes it much more difficult for her. That means she's got to win a Georgia or a North Carolina or an Arizona and Nevada if you add the numbers up there. And that's why they're particularly concerned, because North Carolina not looking great for Harris right now. There's some local reporting that the black voter turnout in North Carolina has not been good. We've also been hearing from folks in North Carolina that Trump's visits there to the hurricane-ravaged region and just the overall feeling in North Carolina, especially in the western part, is not positive. And so many are looking to change right now. And so ultimately, North Carolina, we should note, only won by Democrats one time in recent history. That was Obama back in 2008. But it's been super close. But still, Romney and Trump. Romney won it in 2012. Trump won it twice in 16 and 20. Democrats thought they had a chance there. And they definitely need it as sort of to hedge their bets if she's not able to win in that blue wall up north. And Jill, I mentioned the Arab American vote. Interesting survey data there, basically split this time between Trump and Harris. And that has been a group that has been particularly voting for Democrats going back 20 years, going back to Bush and Republicans going to the war in Iraq. And then, of course, Trump's rhetoric back in 2016 and 2020 regarding Muslims. But they seem to be moving towards him here. So interesting data there as well. And again, they represent a small constituency, but in a race where 10,000 or 20,000 votes could matter, all these trend lines are interesting to be looking at.
Right. I follow a bunch of accounts, and many of those voters are saying that they're going to just vote symbolically for Jill Stein, who is running on the Green Party ticket. Jill
Stein, we should note, super progressive, super pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel. She's also somebody who just shows up every 4 years, though she didn't in 2020. But in 2016, Hillary Clinton people blame her for taking just enough votes away from her that leads to her losses in Wisconsin. So a lot of animosity from Democrats for Jill Stein. And by the way, we should note questions about Jill Stein and her connections because she won't condemn Vladimir Putin. She's close-ish to Bashar Assad, the dictator of Syria. So there are some concerns there, but still disenchanted voters look into her because they're not happy with the main two candidates.
And I think to your point, Moshe, the issue here is that this election, at least according to these polls, appears to be so close that even if a small percentage go for just say Jill Stein, it could really tip the results. So the candidates not taking any votes for granted. Democrats are bringing out the star power. Eminem introduced former President Obama at a rally last night in Detroit for Kamala Harris. Bruce Springsteen will be headlining a Harris and Obama rally in Atlanta on Thursday, kicking off actually a series of concerts in battleground states. He's also going to headline a rally in Philadelphia on October 28th. Donald Trump set to tape an interview with Joe Rogan on Friday, part of his push to win over male voters. Rogan has more than 14 million followers on Spotify.
And when you add it up, we're talking about 30 or 40 million when you add up all platforms.
Most, that's like 2 or 3 pretty large states, actually.
That's like the entire state of California, but a really interesting pool of listeners who listen to him.
Harris is still supposedly in talks with Rogan for a separate appearance. She's doing a sit down with popular author and podcast host Brene Brown. That's a play to get some undecided female voters and people who maybe are not super political. Moshe, I know you asked the Mo News community what they are seeing where they live in terms of everything from lawn signs to early voting turnout. What did you learn?
Yeah, we love the Mo News audience, but it's also a very super engaged audience. So not necessarily reflective of all Americans, but still you guys are our eyes and ears out there. So what are you seeing? Well, a lot of talk of yard signs, right? That's the most visual sample of where the election might go. Hey, I'm seeing a lot more Trump signs this year than I saw in the past, or a lot less signs, or, people are willing to put out their Harris signs. Others saying, I don't read too much into yard signs because they get stolen. We're very divisive these days. So if you're a Democrat in Republican areas, you might not put up the yard sign. If you're a Republican in Democratic areas, you might not put up the yard sign. Some people said, I won't put up the yard sign because, someone said I live in a very red area of Texas. People will shoot at my Harris sign. So I'm not putting it in my lawn. And at the same time, I heard from Republicans in Minnesota and very blue areas who are like, I'm not putting up a Trump sign in my area. Like people will, no longer associate themselves with me. So ultimately, take that for what it's worth in terms of lawn signs. We did hear from a longtime Mo News follower who happens to own a restaurant in Wisconsin, who says that, he has a restaurant in a very black liberal area. And he says he's a Harris supporter, but he certainly sees signs here of alarm bells for Harris in his part of the state, saying it feels a bit more like 2016 than 2020. A lot of folks that should be in the Harris camp, not motivated to vote for her, or also considering a third party vote this go around. But then I also heard from some suburban women in areas who say that they are going for Harris, but might not be public about it because their husbands support Trump. Heard that from a few different folks, or they happen to be in a red area. So they sort of have to keep their support for Harris secret because it's frowned upon in certain areas where they live. I was talking to people in Maricopa County in Arizona, as well as folks in suburban Atlanta there. So fascinating trend lines there. Take it for what it's worth. But I appreciate all of you who give me sort of these interesting anecdotes from across the country. We're hearing from folks in North Carolina, talking about the hurricane experience and how that's potentially shifting the vote there. Those of you in Nevada, we heard from a couple of folks who say that, they wouldn't feel great if they were Democrats this go around. Democrats have always won Nevada in recent cycles by just an edge, and they see signs that Trump might be able to take Nevada and 6 electoral votes this go around. Jill, you mentioned the Joe Rogan interview. That's taking place in Texas. So Trump will be in Texas, and so will Kamala Harris. Not to say that Texas is competitive. It's going to Trump. The Harris people would even admit that. But there is a competitive Senate race there. That's where Congressman Colin Allred is running against Ted Cruz, who's not very popular in the state. So Democrats have high hopes there that they can potentially win the Senate and take out Ted Cruz. Again, unlikely, but possible. And important for Democrats because other races are not going well for them. So if you're Chuck Schumer and Democrats, you sort of need a win in Texas. That's where the Senate is right now. Otherwise, it's going to be Republicans taking the majority there. It also will allow for those of you asking, what is Kamala Harris doing in Texas if they're not going to win Texas with a couple of weeks before the election? Well, it also lets her hit abortion because of the abortion law in Texas. And so that's an issue that plays well for her voters, plays well across the country. So being able to point to a state where women have lost the right to abortion and being able to highlight stories where women in particular have suffered medical issues due to those laws, that's something that the Harris folks think spending a couple hours in Texas this week is effective for.
Time now for the speed read. This top story from CNN. Just a warning, if you're listening with kids, you might want to fast forward a couple of minutes. The former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, Mike Jeffries, has been arrested on sex trafficking and interstate prostitution charges. Jeffries was arrested in West Palm Beach along with his romantic partner, Matt Smith, and their alleged middleman, Jim Jacobson, as part of a criminal sex trafficking investigation by the FBI and federal prosecutors. They're accused in the indictment of orchestrating a sex trafficking scheme in which they recruited men with modeling aspirations, then gave them drugs, alcohol, and Viagra to perform sex acts during sex-themed parties around the world from December of 2008 to March of 2015. Federal prosecutors acknowledged the investigation in January after dozens of alleged victims filed a civil lawsuit a year ago against the couple. alleging the former CEO used his position to exploit and abuse young men.
Just a horrific story here. All three defendants were arrested yesterday, made their appearance in federal court yesterday, and then they're going to be arraigned in the Eastern District of New York as well. We should know Jeffries is 80 years old now. He served as the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch for 22 years, from 1992 till 2014, really transforming that company into a global brand for teen and youth fashion, though many will remember also being accused of sexualizing young people as he branded Abercrombie and Fitch through the 90s and early 2000s there. So some people saying in the comments they're not necessarily surprised given the way that they branded Abercrombie and Fitch, but still the allegations here horrific. The company says it's appalled by the allegations and has launched an independent investigation, though we should say Abercrombie, the company, is facing civil suits, being accused of turning a blind eye to all of this. Now, a lot of details here in these indictments that they organized these sex events in England, France, Italy, Morocco, around the world. They employed coercive and fraudulent and deceptive tactics with the recruitment, hiring, transportation, maintaining, solicitation, payment of these men. Apparently, they were led to believe this could lead to modeling opportunities or help their careers if they didn't comply with these requests. They also allegedly recruited and hired an exclusive set of household staff that participated in all of this, that organized all of this, sort of similar to the allegations around Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and what would happen over there, as well as, what we're seeing unfold here with the allegations and revelations around Diddy and those recent accusations in that trial. We should note, Jill, kudos to the folks over at the BBC that conducted a real investigation into this and produced an explosive report that some are drawing a direct line to his eventual arrest here. They were able to get in touch with men who attended or organized those parties. So some reporting here from the BBC helping to lead to justice, hopefully, for those impacted by this.
From ABC News, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani has 7 days to turn over luxury items and shares of his New York City co-op apartment to cover much of what he owes to two Georgia poll workers that he defamed in 2020. This is according to a ruling from a federal judge in New York. So Giuliani needs to transfer all personal property, including cash accounts, jewelry, and valuables, a legal claim for unpaid attorney's fees, and his interest in his Madison Avenue co-op apartment to former election workers Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss.
Yeah, you might remember last year they won a $148 million judgment against Giuliani for defaming them. He falsely accused them of committing election fraud. It led to death threats for them. And so the court ruled, well, Rudy, you owe them $148 million. So how is he going to pay that? Well, by turning over a bunch of his belongings. And so that includes a whole bunch of watches. He's got Bullovas and Shinolas and Rolexes, etc. He's got a Reggie Jackson signed picture. He has a signed Yankee Stadium picture, a Joe DiMaggio shirt, a whole bunch of sports memorabilia, a diamond ring, TV. He's got turnover a television, apparently, other furniture. They're cleaning him out to... The judge here saying, anything of value needs to go to these people. One exception may be the World Series rings that he has from those Yankees championships from when he was mayor. But his son, Andrew Giuliani, says, no, my dad gave me those World Series rings, so they cannot be turned over. They are my property now. So we'll see what happens with the World Series rings. But Giuliani now dealing with the reality of the various accusations that he made back 4 years ago.
Just a quick reminder here, Freeman and Moss were election workers in Georgia back in 2020. And then this very heavily edited clip of security footage had been widely circulated by Trump allies as sort of proof of election fraud. Giuliani on it, Freeman and Moss, Giuliani had said, were passing USB drives, he said, quote, like vials of heroin or cocaine when they were ballot counting. Moss later explained that she was actually just handing her mom a ginger mint during the ballot counting. Right. But it caused a lot of problems for them. They were getting threats. I mean, this was not without consequences for their lives.
No, and real ramifications for them. And that's why they found that he defamed them. And again, they're regular people. And so their lives were overturned by these accusations. These were some of the accusations that Giuliani, if you recall that infamous press conference at Four Seasons Landscaping in Pennsylvania back 4 years ago, because they forgot they messed up the address and it didn't happen at the Four Seasons Hotel. So they ended up doing it Four Seasons Landscaping. Anyway, Giuliani made those allegations. They had some real life implications here. And so the judge said, we need to set a precedent here that you can't just accuse people of doing this sort of thing without evidence. And they didn't find any evidence. In fact, as you mentioned, they're passing a Mint, not a USB drive. And so now Rudy, formerly known as America's mayor, dealing with the fallout there.
In business news, a follow-up to a story we talked about last week from Fox Business, Walmart announced on Tuesday it will deliver prescription drugs from stores directly to customers as it competes with rivals like Amazon. So the retailer now joining a list of companies, including Amazon, CVS, and Walgreens, that have embraced the trend of delivering prescriptions directly to consumers that have become more reliant on e-commerce. Customers will be able to receive their deliveries in as soon as 30 minutes through the company's express delivery option. The company launched the service after receiving feedback from a significant number of customers who wanted to have their prescriptions delivered along with their groceries and other items that they need in just a single online order.
So this program looks like it's trying to compete here with Amazon Pharmacy, which offers same-day delivery for Prime members, but only in certain states. Right now, you can get it in parts of Texas, Indiana, California, Florida, New York, and Arizona. Drone delivery is available down in College Station, Texas. And also competing here is Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs online pharmacy, which also ships to your door. So, Jill, we're looking at a future here where you may not need to go out to the pharmacy anymore with all these competitors trying to deliver them to your doorstep.
Which is good news because the last place that you should be when you're sick is actually in person at a pharmacy picking up your medicine. Oh, it's the worst thing
during flu season and whatever when you're like in line in the pharmacy and you know that literally you're like, I wonder what the person in front of me and behind me has. Like whatever I'm recovering from, they're going to give me the next thing.
And it's also very good news for elderly, for people who perhaps can't drive themselves to the pharmacy.
Or if you feel so terribly that you're like, I can't get out of bed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is where that 30 minutes or less is hugely important. From the Washington Post, some impatient passengers could be in for a rude awakening the next time they try to line up early to get on a plane. American Airlines.
Paging Jill Wagner.
And family.
And family, please come to the front.
American Airlines has been piloting a system in recent weeks to flag when people attempt to board before their group has been called. Airline employees often refer to these passengers as gate lice. Ouch.
Ouch.
American said that when someone tries to board with the wrong group, its software gives an audible signal and shows the gate agent a message with the correct group. American Airlines tells the Post, we are in the early phase of testing this new technology used during the boarding process.
Shame. They're going with shame, Jill. So American Airlines, like many other airlines, largely prioritizes travelers with status or those who've paid more for, comfort or first class or business class. And so, you have the priority boarding and then you got group 1, group 2, group 3. Main cabin passengers, if you're an American, are group 7 and 8. That's lower priced economy there. They've been testing this technology down in Albuquerque and Tucson. They're going to be expanding it to Reagan National and basically buzzing you if you try to skip the line there, Jill. Why so eager? Why so eager to board so quickly there, Jill? Why not just hang out in the airport until it's your turn?
So I think in fairness to me and my husband, it's something that we only do if we're traveling with our kids because it's so stressful to travel with 2 young kids. And my daughter also used to have so many allergies. So we actually were technically allowed to board early because allergies are considered a disability, but it wouldn't always come up in the computer. So we would have to go and kind of like wipe everything down because you never know who was sitting in the seat before you eating peanuts. So that's part of the reason. Like we just get extremely stressed traveling with our young kids. And we really want to just get in the seats, get everything set up as soon as possible.
So far, and again, I think it changes with age, our philosophy has been waiting until the last second and have the, just like boarding when it's the last possible chance with the baby, just so, there's less time for her to be in the seat and be annoyed and want to jump around and using every available minute outside the gate to, have them exert a bit of energy.
I think that's probably a smarter strategy. I just think my husband and I think, are just nervous travelers when we travel with our kids. So it gives us sort of like a sense of comfort to know, like, okay, we're on the plane. We're good.
So we're about to travel. I mean, we've now graduated from the Duna. If you ever used the Duna, actually, I'm speaking to the person who gave me the Duna.
Have I ever used the Duna?
Have I used the Duna? Actually, Jill gave me that Duna. Anyway, so now Olivia's about to graduate from the Duna, get too big for the Duna device, the half stroller, half car seat. Jill, what are we graduating into now in toddlerdom on the plane?
Moshe, I am glad that you asked, actually, because it is the Costco, not Costco like the store. It's a brand Costco. They make a car seat that's very inexpensive and extremely lightweight. So it's a great
right. That was my concern,
seat.
And it fits in coach.
It fits in coach, and what's nice about it is that's just your car seat. So wherever you go, you have a car seat. You don't have to worry if you're getting an Uber or whatever it is. You don't have to rent a car seat. You already brought one.
All right. If anybody else has other recommendations, I'm taking them. Send me a message over on the Instagram.
Moshe, for your next trip, you're also welcome to borrow ours.
I will borrow yours, and given these new policies, I will wait my turn on when to board.
Or else you will be shamed. Sticking with travel from the Associated Press, emotional farewells are a common sight at airports, but travelers leaving from the New Zealand city of Dunedin are going to have to be quick. There is a new 3-minute time limit on goodbye hugs in the airport's drop-off area. It's intended to prevent lingering cuddles from causing traffic jams. There's actually a sign outside of the terminal that says, quote, max hug time 3 minutes. And it also says that for those who are seeking fonder farewells, they should head to the airport's parking lot instead. what
do they call it always? Kiss and fly? Kiss and fly is the sign that you see as you drive through an airport. Jill, 3 minutes is a lifetime for I think Dunedin probably doesn't have the traffic of Atlanta Hartsfield or Chicago O'Hare, where they might be like, wrap it up after 5 seconds. But still, apparently at the Dunedin airport in New Zealand, the cuddle cap was imposed to keep things moving smoothly, reminding folks that you should be going for a quicker farewell there so they don't have traffic jams. But at the same time, we're told the New Zealanders, the Kiwis down there, don't have the hug police. So no one's really enforcing this down there. So if you folks in Dunedin need that extra minute, looks like you can still take it. It's a suggestion. Jill, one thing that struck me as we were traveling, I remember early on in my relationship with Alex, is in Singapore, there's no, based on the laws in that country, there's no physical affection allowed at all inside the airport. You have to be very careful, or you could face a fine for kissing or, being slightly extra touchy-feely in the airport. Handsy. Don't get too handsy in Singapore, folks. Fair warning. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin in the year 42 BC. Allegedly, it happened on this day. Brutus, the leading conspirator in the assassination of Julius Caesar, dies by suicide after his defeat at the Second Battle of Philippi. 2 years previous, Brutus had joined in the plot against the dictator of Rome, Julius Caesar, believing he was striking a blow for the restoration of the Republic. However, the result of Caesar's assassination was to plunge the Roman world into a new round of civil wars, with the forces of Brutus and Cassius vying for supremacy against Octavian and Mark Antony. After being defeated by Mark Antony, Brutus takes his own life in the year 27 BC there, and the Roman Republic was lost forever. Suddenly you had emperors there. So there we go. Brutus thinking he was doing well with the assassination of Caesar and taking down the Roman Republic with him. On to more positive news in the modern era. 1941, on this day, Dumbo premiered, having its world premiere, the classic Disney film. And on this day in 2001, Apple releases the iPod, a portable media player that becomes one of the most successful and revolutionary products of the early 2000s. We'll still have to explain to our kids, Jill, what the iPod was. Sort of a short era there. Mom, Dad, did you guys have an iPod?
So my husband has a Wrangler, and it's from, I think, about 10 to maybe it's 15 years old. So it's before all the technology came out. Like, it still has a CD player in it. And there was an iPod I noticed I have to ask him. I saw it earlier this week when I was driving, and it's in my pocketbook, and I keep forgetting to ask him, like, what is on this thing? Is it working? What is happening? That's
what I call Music 27. Definitely on the iPod. Some people actually, I know, Jill, you still use an iPod because, especially for working out, etc., because it's not connected to the internet. And so they can listen to their music and they won't get all the distractions of text messages and social media, etc. So there is still sort of an appeal to the iPod. And fun fact for you all, you wonder where the word podcast comes from. Well, the iPod is the pod in podcast. And we end here with a bit of music history. On this day in 1978, I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor premieres. And 26 years ago today, Britney Spears releases her hit, Baby One More Time.
Moshe, both songs that possibly are on that iPod that my husband has.
I think there's a pretty good likelihood that at least I Will Survive or Baby One More Time, one of them at least, is definitely on that iPod.
I'm going to figure out how to listen to the iPod, see if it's charged, and I will report back tomorrow.
That's what I call Disco 27.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
The reviews matter, and we appreciate all of them. So thank you very much. And then premium listeners, go ahead and listen to my breakdown of all things polling if you want to nerd out on polls and politics and the election over in the Mo News Premium Pod. I know you'll be listening, Jill.
Yes, if I can't sleep tonight, I'll put it on, and hopefully. I kid, Moshe. I'm fascinated by the numbers.
It competes with the sounds of the ocean for you.
It's white noise. All right, everyone. Have a good one.